Hoje eu trago para vocês um caso clássico que envolveu pilotos de um avião cargueiro no Alasca depois da vinheta. Olá pessoal, eu sou o Edson Boaventura Júnior, sejam bem-vindos ao canal Enigmas e Mistérios e hoje a gente está com mais um vídeo aí legendado para vocês, com um depoimento de pessoas daquela época e inclusive revelando sobre o acobertamento militar que foi feito neste caso. O caso que a gente está falando para vocês é um caso que aconteceu no dia 17 de novembro de 1986, envolvendo aí um piloto e a sua tripulação de um avião cargueiro que estava transportando vinho de Paris para o aeroporto de Narita, no Japão, e durante esse percurso, quando ele estava passando pelo Alasca, ele teve contato ali com um objeto gigante, imenso, um objeto muito grande, e depois ele teve contato com mais 2 objetos menores, ou seja, ao todo foram 3 OVNIs avistados pela tripulação do voo JAL 1628. Esse voo estava sendo pilotado por um capitão que é experiente, aí tem 30 anos de experiência voando, que é o capitão Kenju Terauchi, e ele estava pilotando um Boeing 747-200F, né, que é um avião cargueiro, como eu já falei. E a explicação oficial foi assim bem chula mesmo, né? Eles quiseram dizer que aquilo não era OVNI, só que passou o tempo e aí ficou comprovado que realmente se tratavam de OVNIs. Tanto é que no fim aí desse vídeo, eu vou colocar 2 vídeos para vocês, é um depoimento do John Callahan, que ele em 2013 veio falar a respeito desse acobertamento. E quem é esse John Callahan? Ele era um aposentado da Força Aérea, que na época ele era o chefe do departamento da divisão de acidentes e de investigações da Força Aérea, e ele esteve envolvido na investigação desse caso específico aí, envolvendo esse piloto japonês. Outra coisa que eu queria falar para vocês é que esses objetos eles foram vistos durante um período bem longo, foram 50 minutos aproximadamente, em que essa aeronave, né, estava indo lá para Narita, para o Japão, e ali sobre o Alasca ele foi vendo e interagindo com os 3 OVNIs. Então deu bastante tempo para eles observarem com detalhes esses objetos que inclusive foram detectados em radares. Então, sem mais delongas aí, vamos ver esses interessantes vídeos legendados.
The close encounter involved a flight captain with 30 years' experience interpreting the sky.
One of the most famous UFO cases anywhere in the world took place in Alaska.
It begins as a routine cargo flight on November 17, 1986. A Japanese plane loaded with wine leaves Paris on the long haul back to Tokyo. But over Alaska, JAL Flight 1628 becomes anything but routine.
This is the first time they've ever had radar data for more than a few seconds on a UFO.
John Callahan was the FAA division head in charge of evaluations and investigations at the time of the JAL flight.
You have an airplane or a structure or a craft that's sitting outside that 747's window.
Just after 6 p.m., Captain Kenju Terauchi and a crew of 2 enter Alaska airspace for the second leg of their journey, heading for Anchorage. At the helm, Captain Terauchi has nearly 30 years in the cockpit. At 6:19 p.m., the crew sees something on the radar. Unable to see another plane outside the window, they ask the control tower to identify it.
Dispatch 1628 Heavy, negative.
Moments later, the crew sees a pair of lights on the horizon.
Inside, we have two traffic in front of us, about a mile ahead.
Anchorage Air Traffic Control still sees nothing.
Over the next 30 minutes of that flight, a variety of incidents and things occurred that made this flight the mystery flight of UFOs.
The JAL transmission catches Anchorage Air Traffic Control off guard.
We're not sure, but we have the traffic inside now.
Anchorage Air Traffic Control now asks Flight 1628 to maintain visual contact with the unknown craft.
We cannot identify the type, but we can see the strobo lights.
Register, say the color of the strobe and beacon lights.
The color is white and yellow, I think.
White and yellow. It's quite a big. I think very quite a big.
It's a huge ship out here. It's no longer an airplane. It's some kind of a huge thing out here that's 4 times as big as an aircraft carrier.
19 minutes after first encountering the unidentified craft, the crew nervously requests a new altitude and change to their flight plan. The goal, shake the unknown craft.
Just deviate from some object requesting 240. Japan 1628, Roger, fighting 240. Japan 1628, heavy. Deviations approved as necessary.
Air Traffic Control requests that the Japanese airliner make a full circle.
Japan 1628, heavy. So I'm going to request you to make a right turn 360 degrees, 360 degree turn, and advise me what your traffic does then. Your traffic appear to be staying with you. Disappears, Japan 1628.
Terauchi believes the unidentified object has disappeared. But now military radar picks up something behind the Japanese airliner.
1628 heavy. Military radar advises they are picking up intermittent primary target behind you. In trail, I say again.
Air Traffic Control requests another jet close by, United Flight 69, to fly within sight of JAL and report any traffic.
Center from United 69. The Japan airliner is silhouetted against a light sky. I don't see anybody around him at all. I can see his contrail, but I sure don't see any other airplane.
But United Flight 69 is too late. The craft has vanished. JAL 1628 continues on to its scheduled stop in Anchorage. Safe on the ground, Captain Terauchi's story makes it to the press.
This sighting was made by an airline pilot with 29 years of experience. The Federal Aviation Administration in this country began an investigation, and it ended today.
The FAA report concludes that the pilot's story cannot be confirmed. They determine that the second radar image is actually an echo of the cargo plane. But former FAA Department head John Callahan believes the official reports are wrong. Callahan's division investigated the radar and cockpit recording from the JAL flight.
Well, a blind man could see that there was another aircraft or craft of some type there because it shows up on radar. It had to be some type of a craft.
Callahan asserts the pilot's eyewitness account is independently confirmed by radar.
Everybody had that target on the radar somewhere along the line. If the pilot said it was a UFO, who are we to say it's not?
To this day, the flight captain maintains that he saw a UFO in the skies of Alaska.
All right, I don't know what I can do in 10 minutes, but I'll do the best I can. Apparently, you guys already have a copy of what I'm going to say. I'll just hit the highlights. I was the division chief of the Accidents, Evaluations, and Investigation Division of the FAA in Washington, D.C. from 1981 to 1988. I was the first man selected for that position, and we created that position. It came about after the air traffic control strike. FAA had no quality control in the system until the strike, and then I was selected for that position, and it turned out to be a division with 5 branches. During this time, I was involved in the investigation of an extraordinary event and was asked not to talk about it. Since retiring, I decided the public had a right for this information and that they could handle it. And nothing's happened to me as a result of discussing this out in public. In early January of 1987, I received a call from the air traffic control facility out in Alaska. It was the region, and they wanted to know what to tell the media. That apparently the office was full of media. They had them in the hall, and every time they went out to do anything, the media was sticking the microphone on their face, and they wanted to know what to tell them. So I said, tell them about what? And he says, about the UFO. And the next one was, what UFO? We had established a procedure that if anything newsworthy happened in the FAA, we in our division were to know right away so we could defend the United States government. Anyway, I said, what UFO? And he says, a couple of weeks ago is what he told me. It was really a couple of months ago. They had a UFO chase a 747 across the Alaskan skies for some 31 minutes. But like, who believes in UFOs? And somehow the media heard that this was going on, and now they're out there in the halls, and he didn't know what to do. They couldn't do their job, and he was kind of panicking. So I gave him our official answer. Tell them it's under investigation. And once you tell them that, they kind of drift away, and they're all gone. Then I said, I want you to pack up all that data we have, all the computer data. And in those days, when we talk about computer data and disk, we're talking about those disks that were like a 78 record player, and it looked like a pie case that they have in the delis. There'd be 10 or 12 of these things inside. That was the disk that we're talking about, not these little things you carry around with you today. So I said, I want all that stuff. I want the voice tapes. I want everything sent to the FAA Tech Center by tomorrow morning. You put them on the red-eye flight, and we're going to go down to the Tech Center and look at what you have. And the Tech Center is where they create the software programs for the FAA, 548 facilities there were at the time. I used to run that automation department, had 176 people working for me. They also had a program called Playback, or I had another name too, I forgot it right now. Anyway, you could go into the facility at the Tech Center, and you could walk into one of the control rooms, and you could say, I want this position to be set up exactly like the position in Alaska. I want to stand over here and look at the radar and see what the control is seeing. I want the voice tapes to come out of the speaker above, and I want them synchronized with what we're looking at. So when the man says he's over Alaska, I want the radar to say he's over Alaska. And I want to see what was going on. But don't shut the program off until I tell you to shut it off. And I had bought a camera with me, what do they call these cameras here? the ones that play these things here. Anyway, I took a video of it the second time they played it. And it was the first time I really used the camera, and it was a little shaky if you ever get to look at it. But it shows you everything that was on the screen. And as they're playing the second one, they shut it off again toward the end. And I finally said, there must be something wrong with our communications, because I didn't come from the South. I said, I want you to leave it on until I say, shut it off. And they were a little hesitant. They didn't want to do that. And I finally told the engineer there, I said, you either do it, I tell you, or tomorrow you're going to have to find another job. So they let it play. Well, toward the end, the controllers had taken a United, and they asked him if they could delay his arrival time and have him check this 747 that was coming southbound. So they vectored him over to the 747. He's about 2,000 feet beneath them. And the United says, it's a beautiful airplane, the moon behind him, it looks good. He says, it's so clear up here, you can see into next Tuesday. And then he passed by. Well, after he passed by, that target that had been chasing the 747 turned around and started following the United as he went down into Alaska. Now, when the Japanese pilot first commanded the frequency, for you guys that are familiar with radar or how the military or the controllers work, when he first commanded the frequency for the controller, the first words out of his mouth was, do you have traffic for me? And when the controller hears these words, it means doom, because right away he forgot something. He's got somebody else up there that shouldn't, and why would a pilot ask if we had traffic? And he looked at his scope and he says, negative, there's no traffic in your area. And the Japanese pilot says, oh yeah, there's traffic out here. And it's at 12 o'clock and about 8 miles, he's telling them. Well, the next thing the controller says is, can you tell me what type it is? Can you make out the type of aircraft? Any markings on the plane that we can find out who it is? He's thinking it's a military aircraft. And the Japanese pilot says, there's no markings. It's as big as 4 aircraft carriers. It has yellow and white lights around the center. And it's big, and he was a little bit worried. Well, this machine followed him down for 31 minutes. Halfway through his flight, he makes a 360-degree turn. Now, when I say he makes it, he doesn't do anything unless the FAA says you can do this. So they told him, if you want to deviate, you want to change your altitude, let us know. And he changed his altitude a couple times, makes a 360, and this UFO stayed with him all the way. Scared the pants off him. I don't know how much more time I got. Anyway, when I got done with
about a minute and a half to 2 minutes.
Okay, so I shoot back to the FAA Center, and the administrator at the time was Admiral Ingen. I don't know if you guys knew Admiral Ingen. I got there about 4:45 because I wanted to go home with my wife. And he heard I was in the building, so he calls me up and he says, give me a 5-minute briefing on what you're seeing. So I gave him what I'm telling you guys here. And they wanted to know if that video I took would play on his TV, and I said, I guess so. The book says it can. So I plugged it in there, and after a few minutes of watching the video, he calls the aide over, and he says, go tell Kennedy I'm going to be a few minutes late. So he's watching it a little bit more, and then he finally calls the aide over and says, go cancel the rest of my appointments tonight. We'll reschedule for sometime next week. He says, I have to go see the president, and we're talking about Reagan. So when he got all done, he says, don't talk to anybody. I'll get back with you, and I'll tell you what to do. I'm on my way to see Reagan. Next morning, I came to work, and I got a call from some guy who said he was at the CIA. He wanted to talk about a UFO. I said, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I don't know anything about UFOs. He says, well, the one that happened over Alaska, I said, you probably want to talk to the Admiral. I don't know what you're talking about. A few minutes later, the Admiral calls down and says, I've set up a briefing for you tomorrow at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever it was, in the round room. He says, the president's scientific staff is coming over. Some CIA guys will be there. I think he said 3, matter of fact, and some grunts will be coming along with them. He says, your task is to hand this stuff off to them. When they leave here, they have to take this with them because the FAA does not control UFOs. Now, I showed them all this stuff. And when they
You have
got
about 45 seconds. So.
Okay. When they got all done, one of the scientists come out and said they had 3 or 4 questions. They wanted to know the speed of the antenna, the frequency of the antenna, the logarithm for the height finding equipment. And the people I brought with me just happened to be experts and they answered all the questions. When they get done, the CIA guy standing next to me says to the people, this event, pointing to the big screen they have in the room, this event never happened. We were never here. We're confiscating all this data, and you're all sworn to secrecy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cullen, the event that you describe is exactly the kind of thing that I think is most creditable. Let me understand, how many different people saw this?
Saw the radar return?
Well, are there not people that saw the craft and people that saw the radar returns both?
No, the only ones that saw the craft was the Japanese pilot and the other two with him. His co-pilot.
Okay, so there were 3 people that saw the craft, all right. And how many people saw the radar?
20, 30.
23 people?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that are just very difficult to explain away, where you have eyewitnesses and a radar track, and a real radar track. But apparently some of these things don't leave a radar track.
Então, pessoal, muito interessante esse caso, né? Então, se você gostou, clica aí no joinha. Se não é inscrito em nosso canal, se inscreva no nosso canal, nos acompanhe aí nas redes sociais e até o próximo programa com Edson Boaventura Júnior.